Hey, everybody. Welcome to week 4 of Science Fiction Studies. Semester is flying by. We just finished up our first book, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? Now we're moving on to Arthur C. Clarke's Childhood's End, which is one of my personal favorites. Um, it is a small book with very big ideas, and I would say it's a book that could not have been written by any less of a dominating figure than Arthur C. Clarke. I'm sure many of you have heard of Arthur C. Clarke. He was not only, this sort of prolific, brilliant writer of science fiction, but he was also so much more. He was a scientist, he was an inventor, he was a humanitarian, and probably his most famous contribution to the science fiction canon would be 2001: A Space Odyssey. He wrote the screenplay in collaboration with Stanley Kubrick, who directed the film, and he also wrote the novelization of the movie as well. He's also known for Rendezvous with Rama, The City and the Stars, The Songs of Distant Earth, countless number of science fiction short stories, famous science fiction short stories, and of course the book we're talking about today, Childhood's End. And something that sort of I feel like isn't talked a lot about, but is extremely important. One of his biggest kind of contributions to science and humanity was not through his fiction. It was in 1945, he actually published a short paper, an academic paper, that would change the way we communicate with one another forever. And basically, what he did was he was the first to set out the principles of communication satellites in geosynchronous orbit. So he basically led the way for global communication. I'm not a scientist, so I'm a bit of a what's the word? Uh, Not a beginner, but a novice when it comes to scientific writing. But after reading this paper, it seems like he sort of paved the way for the internet, cell phones, television, etc. It's amazing that he didn't win the Nobel Prize for this feat. I know he was nominated. I believe he was nominated for the Nobel Prize, but he never actually won it. So anyway, Childhood's End is considered to be one of his most significant thought-provoking books. It's a story rife with symbolism, themes, motifs, and it delves into many different topics that that are pretty prominent today, and they badger us today. I mean, when we talk about religion and world peace and utopia, end times, extraterrestrial life, the end of history. I mean, in this little tiny book, we can find all that. So it's I think an indelible part of the canon, the science fiction canon, and it would be uh, silly not to discuss this book when it comes to the topic of science fiction. So just a little overview. The story begins with an event that has been sort of rehashed over and over again in science fiction since its infancy. You know, the Earth is suddenly infiltrated by aliens from another world. And these aren't the, sort of bloodthirsty Martians from War of the Worlds. Rather, these are very intelligent, extraordinarily intelligent, powerful beings that take complete control and peacefully take control. And we find our first sort of overarching theme right from the get-go: power, absolute power. The overlords, which is what people begin to refer to these giant alien vessels as, are infallible to every defensive tactic we could ever think of. At the time, nuclear war and warheads were considered, sort of bleeding edge technology. And a missile is actually fired at one of the ships, and it just disappears. It doesn't even explode, so it just vanishes. So they're sort of infallible to what we um, to our defensive tactics. And one of the cool things about this book is that it's broken up into parts, and these parts are generations. So we have Earth and the Overlords, the Golden Age, and Childhood to End, the Last Generation, rather. So 3 parts plus an introduction. And Earth and the Overlords, the first part sort of works as this well, it works as an introduction to these creatures. We get to know them, and we get to know some human characters as well. And the cool thing about it is it surrounds this relationship, in particular, between a United Nations secretary named Stormgren and Corellin, who is the first Overlord to introduce himself to the world. And there's also a gentleman named Wainwright, who is the leader of a group called the Freedom League. And this is sort of like a, religious, libertarian based group that is absolutely opposed to the overlords, absolutely opposed to anything that the overlords have to offer. They just want them to go away. They want their sovereignty back, basically. And what I sort of noticed about this first section, and you may not have, and that's fine, but it sort of reminds me of almost like a prototypical techno thriller. Think of James Patterson or Tom Clancy novels with aliens, basically. Because at one point in the book, Stormgren gets kidnapped ingeniously by this sort of shadowy group of individuals that are most likely associated with the Freedom League. We never really find out. He gets taken underground to their sort of lair and is interrogated for information in regard to Corellin. And this group is convinced that kidnapping, their way of kidnapping Stormgren is completely infallible. There's no way that Corellin will ever find him, basically because he's underground. But of course he is found, and of course he has nothing to give, because even though he is really the only human that has had contact with this alien being, Corellin is very careful with the information that he shares. So they really don't gain anything from this, and it's basically a big waste of time. Stormgren is rescued, and he's taken out of that pickle, and that's pretty much it. And there's something important to remember too here. Throughout all of this, like I said, Stormgren is the only person who really has had direct contact with an overlord. He hasn't actually seen Corellin yet. Every time they meet, Corellin's behind this piece of sort of one-way glass, and he's very, very careful not to show himself, and very protective of his identity. And Stormgren becomes obsessed with this. He needs to know what Corellin looks like. And he also needs to know why he won't show himself. So we also, as the audience, the readers, we sort of want to know why he won't show himself too. The overlords have this unlimited godlike power, and regardless of what human beings would think of as far as his physical appearance, Corellin's physical appearance goes, it really doesn't matter. I mean, we really don't have a choice either way. So why is he being so protective of his identity? And that's something to think about. And of course, we later we understand why later when we find out what Corellin actually looks like. But I think that at that point in the book, Corellin is just sort of focused on gaining the trust of humanity, of human beings. He wants them to know, he wants us to know that no matter what he looks like, no matter how perhaps terrifying he is, it's okay because he's a good guy. So, and if you read further on, you know that there's, it's just ingenious that what Clark did as far as what he based the overlords on, because it really is something I feel like that we would all as human beings find terrifying if we actually saw in the flesh. So we'll get to that, but basically Corellin estimates that it'll take about 50 years before the overlords can actually show themselves. This is a huge bummer for Stormgren because he is already up there in age and there's no way he's going to be around for another 50 years, and he has to see what his new friend looks like. So he thinks of an elaborate plan. He meets up with this physicist, I believe, and they who sort of creates this super high powered flashlight that will penetrate the glass that that Corellin's behind. It doesn't work. Corellin, is always sort of a step ahead of Stormgren, and he just leaves before he actually is seen. But I do think that this is a sort of form of deception. And I think that trust and deception kind of go hand in hand as far as themes in this book or motifs. I mean, it's throughout the whole book, this sort of delicate balance of trust and deception. And that is our first kind of example of it. So that's the first section of this book, Earth and the Overlords. The next section is the Golden Age. And I think it's kind of cool that Clark refers to this section as the Golden Age, because the Golden Age of science fiction was predominantly composed of writers like Arthur C. Clarke and Isaac Asimov. And I don't know if that's a little nod to the genre at that point in time, but it's kind of cool that he decided to name the second section that. And it's called the Golden Age because it's exactly what it is. I mean, human beings are living their best lives. They don't want for anything. We'll get more into that later, but most importantly, the beginning of this chapter is finally the big reveal of the overlords, what they actually look like. It's been 50 years. The day has finally come, and we actually get a chance to see what they look like. And the question still is, how bad could it be? So this is what they look like. Let me just pull my screen up here. All right, share screen. Here we go. Get out of here. That's what they look like. Okay, Lucifer, the devil. This is a famous drawing from Dante's Inferno, but this is basically what Clark based the overlords off of. So it's ingenious because we as a society, religion and folklore is a very big, plays a very big role in our lives, and has for a very long time. And this particular image is a physical manifestation of evil, and what evil is. So no matter how good these creatures are, there's always going to be this sort of, you know, albeit slight form of distrust, I would say, because of what they look like. Corellin knows this. The overlords know this, and that's why they take such a long time to actually introduce themselves, because they know that we as a species are going to have a very hard time with this. And how he does decide to introduce himself is he has them send a child up to the entrance of the ship, picks the child up, and they're huge, by the way. They're like 12 feet tall. And he puts the child on his shoulder, and that's how he introduces himself, basically showing that he is gentle and that he is nothing to be afraid of. So that's the big reveal. Okay. So that's basically all I have for this section. And I guess the only other thing that I want to share and put out there is just another motif. And like I had already said, religion and folklore play a big part in this book. And science fiction is usually not based on mysticism or new age philosophy. And I think another of many reasons why this book is so clever is that Arthur C. Clarke injects these ideas into this book, and does it in a way that's not silly or seemingly, tacked on or pushed onto us. It's very natural and organic the way that he does it. So, and don't get me wrong, this book is not perfect. I was just reading one section in particular where he's talking about race, and how, what a post-racial society may look like. I think it's page 82 or 83, and I do think he gets it wrong as far as that goes. He basically says that a particular racial slur is accepted now, and doesn't hold the horrific sort of connotation that it does now. And I disagree with that personally. I think that this particular word is always going to have a sort of connotation of disgust, and I don't think it'll ever be accepted. So yeah, he does get some things wrong, but of course he does. None of these guys had crystal balls when they were writing these books, and the fact that he got so much right, though, I think is just amazing. So they didn't have crystal balls, but it kind of seems like, wow, maybe they did, I don't know. But so, yeah, so that's basically where we're at right now. We're kind of, I don't know, in the middle of the Golden Age. And the next lecture, we're going to finish the Golden Age, and then we're going to talk about the last generation. And then that's basically the end of this book. As always, if you have any questions, please let me know. And I look forward to hearing what you have to say about Arthur C. Clarke's Childhood's End. Have a nice day.